Welcome back to the deep dive. So think about the last time you were really put on the spot. Maybe a tough question in a big meeting. Client presentation, you know that feeling, right? That kind of electric pressure. Everyone goes quiet. All eyes are on you, just waiting. And there's this immediate reflex that feels almost hardwired to just shoot back the fastest, smartest sounding answer you can possibly think of. Today, we're really going to dive deep into that specific reflex. Our source material looks closely at this powerful, pretty widespread idea in professional life that, well, speed equals intelligence. We're basically conditioned, aren't we? To think the smartest person in the room is whoever blurts out an answer first when things get tricky.
And that idea, well, according to the research we've looked at, it's not just a bit off, it's deeply flawed. In fact, our sources call it a myth. And not just any myth, but a destructive one. Especially, they say, for leaders, for people making big decisions. So our mission today really is to unpack why this pressure to be instant is so, well, counterproductive. We'll get into the real costs of just reacting versus actually thinking things through. And we want to give you, the listener, the exact counter tactic you need.
Okay, let's get stuck into this destructive impulse then. The source material seems really clear on this point. Firing back an answer instantly. That's a sign of impulse. It's not, genuine, deep intelligence. It shows you're reacting, basically, not thinking analytically. So if we accept that speed is a kind of trap, what are the actual tangible consequences of rushing to judgment like that?
Right, and this is really the core analysis we want you to take away today. When you rush, when you just jump in with an answer, you're introducing three pretty serious risks. Big risks to the quality and the whole context of your decision. The first one, and maybe the most common one we see, is that you end up missing the real question. Think about it like this. The person asking. They often just state the symptom, not the underlying problem. So if you answer instantly, you're only hitting that surface level thing they just said. You completely miss the complex, maybe systemic issue that's hidden underneath. You might say, suggest a quick fix for a budget issue. But if you don't pause, if you don't ask why the shortfall happened, well, you haven't solved anything, really. It's like putting a Band-Aid on an oil leak instead of actually fixing the pipe. You've mistaken the prompt they gave you for the actual problem.
Oh, I see that all the time, yeah. It ticks a box, right? Satisfies that immediate need for an answer, an action item. But it doesn't create any real stability long term. Okay, so if risk one is basically tackling the wrong problem, what's risk two? Something about the data we use.
Exactly. Risk two is directly tied to accuracy. You overlook key facts, simple as that. See, the rush to give an answer, it pulls entirely from what's immediately in your head. Your short-term memory, your ingrained assumptions, your biases maybe. You simply haven't given yourself any time to, say, gather necessary outside information or check in with subject matter experts or even just question your own assumptions. When a really high-stakes question comes up, a thoughtful leader gets that, maybe 80% of the really relevant information isn't right there in their head at that moment. So the fast answer, it's almost always based on incomplete data. You could be brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But if you're only working with half the variables, your solution's going to be half-baked. Doesn't matter how fast you came up with it.
That makes complete sense. But, okay, here's where I feel a bit of friction with the real world sometimes. In those super competitive, really fast-paced industries, thinking like finance or parts of tech, there's this huge pressure, this belief that data gathering is just code for delaying. How do we square that? The need for speed in those environments versus the need for accurate data.
That's a really important point, and it's a common dilemma. The source material actually tackles this. It differentiates between, say, simple logistics and complex decision-making. If the building is literally on fire, yes, speed is everything, get everyone out. But if the question is more like, how do we fireproof this building for the next decade? Well, the immediate impulsive answer is pretty much useless, isn't it? Real leaders, thoughtful ones, they don't just consume information, they contextualize it. They understand that the tiny, momentary gain of looking fast is almost always wiped out by the long-term pain of rolling out a bad decision based on incomplete facts. They have the discipline, really, to know when it's time to switch gears, from quick action mode to careful analysis mode.
Right, that discipline. And that actually leads us perfectly into the third risk, which I think can be incredibly damaging, especially within a team.
Exactly right. The third risk is shutting down the team. And this is purely about leadership failure. When you, as the person in charge, the authority figure, just fire back an answer instantly, you effectively silence the room, you cut off the collective brainpower right there. The signal you're sending, intended or not, is crystal clear. My gut reaction is more important than any thought you might have. And that just kills psychological safety instantly. Why would anyone on your team stick their neck out? Why would they offer a different perspective, maybe some conflicting data, if they feel the decision's already been made impulsively by the boss?
Yeah.
You stop collaboration dead in its tracks. You turn what could be a diverse team of thinkers into just passive order takers.
It's fascinating, isn't it? How that instant answer doesn't just hurt the specific outcome. It actually damages the whole system, the team dynamic that's supposed to produce good outcomes. The leader looks fast, sure, but the organization as a whole gets slower, less creative, less innovative over time because of it. Okay, so if real intelligence isn't about speed, what does thoughtful leadership actually look like in practice? What are they doing instead?
Thoughtful leadership looks like, well, control and deliberation. It's defined by being thorough, not just first. When a genuinely thoughtful leader gets hit with a tough question, their very first action is incredibly powerful, but it looks quite simple. They pause. And this pause, it's not hesitation, it's active. It's a moment of taking control, not showing confusion. And what happens during that strategic pause is crucial. They're listening, really listening, not just to the words, but, hearing the implications, reading between the lines. And crucially, they're asking clarifying questions. Questions that steer the conversation back towards the real underlying problem, not just the surface symptom we talked about earlier. A good leader uses language to actually create space, not just fill the silence. They might even say something explicit like, that's a really important point, and because it has significant consequences, I need a bit of time to think that through properly. Make sure we cover all the angles. See? That sets an expectation. It manages the timeline proactively.
Okay, but let's circle back to that pressure cooker environment we mentioned. It can feel like career suicide sometimes to admit you don't have the answer right that second. For a lot of people, maybe earlier in their careers or if they're under intense scrutiny, pausing just feels like you're signaling weakness or incompetence, like you're basically saying, I don't know.
And that feeling is precisely the leverage the myth uses against us.
Right.
We absolutely need to reframe how we interpret that pause psychologically. The pause is explicitly not a sign of weakness. It's actually a demonstration of strength and respect. When you pause thoughtfully, you're signaling two key things. First, you respect the question itself. You're saying, this isn't trivial. This deserves more than a knee-jerk response. And second, perhaps even more importantly, you're signaling commitment. You're showing everyone that you are far more committed to finding the right answer, the one that will actually work, the durable solution, than you are to just looking smart by being quick. You're choosing competence through commitment over the appearance of competence through speed.
So the thoughtful leader kind of manages the perception of the pause itself. They own that silence instead of letting the silence and the pressure own them. They know the difference between something that's truly urgent, like the fire alarm going off, and something that's just important, needing careful thought.
Precisely. And if you look at that pause through the lens of, say, cognitive control, it shows the leader can resist that really powerful, almost primitive psychological urge we all have to just fill the silence, resisting that urge. That's a sign of high executive function, emotional maturity. It's the absolute opposite of weakness.
That really clarifies the value shift, doesn't it? Moving the focus from speed to substance. Okay, and let's try and distill this down. What's the most crucial sort of concise takeaway the source material offers? The thing we should etch in our minds. Okay, here it is. The next time you feel that pressure, that professional demand for an immediate answer, remember this fundamental distinction from our sources. A fast answer is a reaction.
And, critically, the counterpoint is, a thoughtful answer is a solution. That simple framework reaction versus solution, that should honestly guide you in pretty much every professional interaction. If you start applying that principle to everything from how you draft a difficult email to how you contribute in a meeting to how you lay out a long-term strategy, you fundamentally shift how you operate. You move from being just an impulsive responder to being, well, a deliberate architect of solutions. It's the difference between running on knee-jerk reactions and running on considered thought and verified information.
So the ultimate lesson here, really, it's about building up our resilience, isn't it? Resilience against that deep-seated psychological pressure to perform instantly. We need to actively, consciously resist that need for speed culture sometimes and choose depth over pace, even and maybe especially when it feels uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And, while our deep dive today really zeroed in on the output, the quality of the answer itself, I want to leave you with one final thought. It's a provocative one, maybe, but it flows directly from the logic we've discussed. If finding a truly thoughtful solution requires us to pause and it requires us to ask those clarifying questions, what does that tell us? What does it fundamentally imply about the single most underrated skill in this whole process? It implies that the importance of listening, Truly actively listening to the nuances, the context, the unspoken parts of the question. That's the hidden foundation, isn't it? The prerequisite for all great decision-making. That's the question for you to mull over as you work on shifting from just reacting instantly to thinking thoughtfully.
That is a powerful thought to end on. So there you have it. You now have the insight and hopefully the permission to hit that pause button when you need it. Use it. Take that thoughtful pause, listen really carefully, and turn your next reaction into a proper, durable solution. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.